The NBA playoffs are underway very soon, but before we get into the playoff matchups, predictions and all those fantastic things that we love with regard to the playoffs, reaction videos, all that stuff, I want to talk to you guys about the playoff X factors for this current NBA playoff season that we are about to get underway. Now, of course, I'm not really gonna talk about every single playoff team because there are some teams there that I genuinely don't believe they have an X factor. They're probably gonna be first round outs. And it just is what it is. That's the lay of the land. That's how it works. We're going to see that. There are some teams that I do have an X factor for them. While this doesn't quite mean I think that X factor will show up and or happen, game in and game out to be able to win a series, like in the course of Orlando versus Cleveland or the Hawks against Boston, which I think will end up being the matchups. I do have X factors, but that does not necessarily mean I think this is what's going to help them win. I think it'll help them give them a shot. But winning, that's a whole nother ball game. Now, of course, for majority of the teams in this video, the X factor does have a lot of significance, whether or not that team is winning, going on to the next round, and in some instances, having a deep playoff run. Of course, there's teams like the Lakers, Rockets, Knicks, who they need their X factors to be absolutely perfect or at least at a level of consistency that allows them to be able to compete with those top teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers, like the Boston Celtics, and in the Lakers case, like OKC, like the Nuggets and Houston Rockets and teams of that nature. Now, before we hop into the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you do enjoy this type of content, you enjoy me. And if you don't like it, go ahead and dislike it, but make sure you add some constructive feedback in the comments below so I know how I could get better with making the content for you guys and growing this channel as it should be. Without further ado, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. I'm going to put timestamps in the description. It'll likely create chapters on the video so that if you just want to hear your favorite team and want to skip to that, you'll be able to do that. And you'll have all the liberty to do so. Just let me know what you think about your favorite team's X factor in the comments down below. As already stated before, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. And I like to go top down so you can actually know, some type of direction where I'm going with this video. And top down starts with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, personally for me, with the Cavs, it comes down to their front court, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. We need to see the same type of development that we saw during this season that we didn't really see in seasons past. But even more, we need to see them show up in the playoffs better than we've seen, most namely last year. The injury to the Don did not help matters for this team going forward. But if we actually saw Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley playing to the level that they played throughout the season, last year's playoffs, it might have been a lot easier for the Cavaliers to advance to the next round, survive Donovan Mitchell missing some games, and being able to continue their playoff run. That's why I think this year it's vital for those two guys to be consistent game in and game out. And for Evan Mobley specifically on the offensive end, we need to continue to see that growth that we've seen throughout this 82 game stretch in this regular season translated to the playoffs. Both players have been historical playoff droppers, but personally, I got faith in Evan Mobley. I think Jarrett Allen has gotten used to the noise despite the lights were brighter than I expected meme and conversation that he had before. I think those two guys are ready. Now, Jarrett Allen, I'm worried about him more because he does have a softness to him, but I'm hoping he turns it on a little bit, especially because I feel like this team is going to play the Magic, which is a team that has largely had their number throughout the year. So you're going to need some moxie from those guys. You're going to need your front court a lot. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are going to do what they do, and it makes it easier on them because Jalen Suggs is out. They do have some injuries in the backcourt for Orlando, but Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen are going to have to do their damnedest to do well against Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Now, of course, I don't expect Jarrett Allen to guard Franz Wagner or Paolo, but they still have to be able to be great and efficient players on the defensive and offensive end. Moving on to the next team, which is the Boston Celtics, and honestly, they don't really have many X factors. It's nothing crazy, and I'm not gonna lie, the X factor that I'm about to name it gets overblown by a lot, but it is a true X factor for them. And that's a poor shooting night in my humblest of opinion. Like I said, this can be overblown. It has been overblown and this team has survived, but we've also seen stretches where they've gone almost ice cold and they've been blown out the water. Now, of course, I highly doubt this happens for 4 games and they're out the playoffs. But with that said, this is something that you gotta watch for. When you take so many threes, you do have to live and die by that. This is a team that does it. More often than not, they live by it. But if they have a string of nights where they die, you give a team some type of confidence to be able to go forward and think they can beat you. It can very well happen. Confidence is huge when it comes to the NBA playoffs and being able to push through the team that you're playing. Of course, this wouldn't happen in the first round or anything like that. I said before, I expect them to play the Atlanta Hawks, fully expect it, or the Orlando Magic, but either way, it'll be tough for both of those teams to match the firepower that the Celtics have. So this X factor more has to do with their second and third round play as they get deeper into the playoffs. Our next team up for their X factors is the New York Knickerbockers. With regard to the New York Knicks, I think there's 2 X factors, and it comes down to Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. I have faith in Karl Anthony Towns. He's shown me to be a rock solid player in the playoffs back in the Western Conference, which was a much harder conference when we're talking about playoff matchups. So I think he can do it very well in the East. Been terrorizing the East all year, so I'm not too worried about him. Same with Jalen Brunson. But as it relates to Mikal and OG Anunoby, we're going to need to see consistent scoring from both of them. Now, Mikal Bridges, I've seen him score a lot better in certain games. The Knicks are going to need that in that 7-game stretch, especially when you're in the second and third round. When you're seeing teams like Boston, you're seeing teams like Cleveland, you're seeing those other matchups that can be difficult for your team going forward. I would even argue that you're going to need this if you see a team like the Pistons or the Bucks, who are 2 very, very good defensive teams that you're going to have to make sure your others are scoring to help the load for Cat and Jalen Brunson. And that is going to be the biggest key for the Knicks to be able to keep pushing into a deep playoff run. The Indiana Pacers have been a solid team. Of course, got to a slow start. I think the biggest thing for them, and it kind of points to that slow start that they had in the season, is consistency. Now, I'm not worried about Pascal Siakam. He has showed me in the playoffs that he's that guy, averaging 20 points a game in Toronto. Last year in the playoffs with Indiana, he averaged 20 points a game as well. You know what you're going to get from him. You can pretty much expect that kind of production. But with the others, I need you to be consistent. I need Nembhard to be consistent. I need Benedict Mathurin. I need Miles Turner to be consistent on the offensive end. Now, they're always going to give effort. They're a team that is high effort, high energy. I need to know that I can count on you offensively. Benedict Mathurin, when I need you to hit this 3, I need you to hit it. Miles Turner, when we get it to you in the block, we need you to finish this possession every single time down the stretch. And that's my real challenge for the Pacers, because I haven't really seen it this year yet from them. I genuinely think if they can do that, they'll be able to compete with some of these teams that people don't think they can compete with at all. That's the Knicks, that's the Celtics, that's the Cavs, even the Bucks and Pistons. It's going to be hard for me to see them compete with those teams, because can you do it for 7 games? And that's my only question. Let's see if they can do it. Moving on to the Bucks. The Bucks are a funny one, because the Bucks are one where it doesn't really come down to a player for me. It comes down to coaching. And we know when we get to the playoffs, it is a chess match. It's time to really get the X's and O's, figure out ATOs, baseline out of bounds, sideline out of bounds, all these different plays that you're able to draw up to get quick hitters and score off of dead balls. I don't trust Doc Rivers with that. And when we get to the playoffs, those are important. Capitalizing off of those ATOs, capitalizing off of dead ball turnovers or even live ball turnovers.
Take it, attack it, throw it, now play the game.
Now, I can admit live ball turnovers don't have much to do with Doc Rivers, but when we're talking about the dead ball turnovers, where you have your 2 to 3, 4, 5 plays that you know can get you a bucket, or at least get you a good look, get Giannis a look, get Kuz a look, get Dame a look when he does come back. Bobby P, get him on the block, high post, whatever you may need to do to get your guys easier looks, you got to be able to do that, especially in the playoffs. And Doc Rivers has shown me he hasn't been able to do that. Doc Rivers has also shown me that when he plays a coach of the magnitude of a Joe Mazzulla or Kenny Atkinson in Cleveland, it gets wicked. It gets real wicked real quick because all you got to do is throw a wrench in his game plan. He doesn't really adjust. And we've heard other players that have played for him say the same thing. So it's not something that I'm just, throwing it out there or my Doc Rivers hate, because I don't really like Doc Rivers. But it's not that. I don't have faith in him to coach when it's time to coach. When you need to really get a bucket, when you need to get a stop, situational awareness and situational coaching is not one of his strong suits, and that's going to be the hardest thing to overcome for the Bucks with regard to a long run in this year's playoffs, especially against those top teams, Celtics, Cavs, hell, even the Knicks, because Tom Thibodeau can get you a little something, especially out of those Knicks, who are a very good scoring team. Moving down to the 6th seed and our last full-on playoff spot team, the Detroit Pistons. Now, it's not too much for me with regard to their X factors, but their biggest X factor, and we've seen it all year, is their discipline. We need to make sure Isaiah Stewart is on this floor. We need to make sure, Cade, when the game's not going your way and the refs are doing what refs do, just chill out a little bit. Now, I admit it was not your fault. You shouldn't have got ejected. I can't remember what game it was. If I'm not mistaken, it was against the Timberwolves, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but long story short, he got 2 quick takes real quick. Things like that you just can't do. You can't happen, especially when you're in a close game battling and it's the 4th quarter. Your team needs to make a run or, close out the game. My bad, chat. We had to reset a little. My camera talking about we ain't got no memory whole time. Most of my camera memory ain't even me. It's crazy, right? I'm doing content for other people. Hey, if y'all need some videography services, go on Twitter or Instagram. I'm not doing it. But in any case, I don't know. We were talking about the Pistons. That's who we were talking about. Longer story short, they need some discipline about them. That simple as that. You can't have players missing games. You can't have players getting kicked out of games. Keep your aggressive attitude, but do it within reason. Simple as that. And I think the Pistons could actually do some things and surprise some teams if they can make sure to keep their discipline about them. We move on to the bottom 2 teams in the Eastern Conference, and this is where I was kind of talking about and referring to in the beginning of the video, where I mentioned that there's teams where their X factor can do everything they need to do and still lose. And this is that part where I think it's kind of there. While I love Orlando and I love Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, who is not playing for the Hawks, I don't think neither of these teams really will be able to get to the second round based on the teams that they're playing. But with Orlando, and if we see them play the Cavs most specifically, I would say their X factor is literally just playing hard throughout. As they already know, they can beat Cleveland. They've seen it, they've done it, and they have that confidence to do it. So just play hard throughout from start, game 1 to game 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever you get to, and you might see the fruits of your labor to the point where you might get 2 games on them. Now you have a little bit of confidence. If you could get that 3rd and sneak it, you could do a little something. But if they see Boston, which is more than likely going to happen and what I'm anticipating, kiss it goodbye. Try again next year. Good luck. You guys did good this year, especially battling the injuries that you did battle, because you were at the top of the conference before Paolo and Franz got hurt. So with that said, you could take that to the bank, come back next year, reworked, redeveloped, refined, and ready to take over the East. Now with the Hawks, either team that they play, I think is goodbye. They just have an extra week not going on vacation. That's really all it comes down to for the Hawks, in my opinion. But nevertheless, as it relates to an X factor, I think it really comes down to being able to contain on the defensive end, whether that's against the Cavs or the Celtics, especially against the Celtics, because those guys aren't super consistent on the offensive end. So it is going to be tough for the Hawks to do some of anything in this playoffs. But with that said, their best shot would be to hunker down on the defensive ends, figure out some defensive schemes, and try to, turn more defense into offense, something that you don't usually see the Hawks do. Now, again, I think it's 1 extra week removed from Cancun, but you never know. It's the NBA where amazing happens, so they say. Moving on to the Western Conference side of things, which I think their X factors are a bit more in depth, and there's a lot more room for the X factors to actually affect the game where it relates on the West side as opposed to the Eastern Conference. We're going to do the same as we did before, go from the top to the bottom, and that's just pretty much how it goes. I don't know why I always got to explain things to y'all. Y'all know how it goes at this point. At this point, we just going to go. So, OKC Thunder, X factor, what is it? Now, a lot of people are saying it's J-Dub and how good he is in the playoffs, if he's going to be a riser, if he's going to be not a good playoff player. I think it's more so Chet Holmgren. And I think this because while he'll be a defensive stalwart, and we know that, I think on the offensive end, if he can find a way to create 11 to 15 points per game, it will be a problem for other teams going forward because you're going to have the 25 plus points from SGA. I believe in J-Dub personally to where he'll average around 18 to 20 points in the playoffs. But if Chet can add to that with, let's say on the high end, 15 points per game in the playoffs, this team is going to the championship. This team will compete with Boston, and this team might have a real shot at winning the chip. But I think it more so falls on Chet Holmgren than it does J-Dub. And I know most people have spoken about J-Dub being that X factor, but I'll be honest, I have faith in him. I think J-Dub is offensively polished enough to be able to take on that challenge. And for me, it really comes down to Chet Holmgren and how well he's going to do on the offensive end. Of course, I would say a minor X factor for OKC is their bench and their bench play. But I'm also not so worried about that. They got some bucket getters coming off the bench in Isaiah Joe. Lou Dort isn't a bench player, but bucket getter for sure. You have Hartenstein there. You have a lot of guys, Caruso there. You have Case and Wallace. You have players that can put the ball in the basket while playing wonderful defense. So if Chet can match with all that, it'll be magnificent for OKC going forward. Even further, I think that just opens up the offensive game for both J-Dub and SGA even more. Because now if we have to worry about Chet Holmgren being a true threat on the offensive end, that's even more to game plan against for the next team. The Rockets are the next team in the West, that second seed under OKC. And to me, their X factor, their main X factor is both experience and Ime Udoka. Now, what I mean by that is this is a young team with a promising future. Very, very promising. But young and playoffs, postseason, a deep postseason at that, they don't go together very, very well. So with that said, Ime Udoka has been a wonderful developmental coach, and he has continued to be that. But when it comes to that experience, Ime is going to have to be the one to fill in those gaps and help these young guys be able to get past that learning curve that is postseason basketball. You're going to have to make sure that your game planning is right and tight for these guys in ways that you don't have to worry about for a team like the Lakers, a team like the Celtics, teams that have been there before that understand the ebbs and flows and the adaptability that is needed in the postseason. This is going to be big for the Rockets because it's one of those teams where if they have a bad matchup, they can be upset. I genuinely believe that. First round will be tough for them regardless, in my humble opinion. Their best bet to me is hoping that the Kings or Mavericks sneak into the playoffs and they play them. As it relates to those bottom teams that they may have to see, like Memphis, for example, it can get really wicked for the Rockets very quick, especially if Ime isn't tightening up those loose screws as it relates to their experience. Moving on to the third team in the Western Conference, and my favorite team, the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I'm not going to be delusional here. I'm real. We have no big man. We have no true big man. We have no big man present. Well, I'm not going to say we don't have big man presence because LeBron has done that job very, very well. He's been able to adapt his game to guard fives, play the fives, and know how to play off the ball. He has played off the ball very, very well, which was funny to me that was a concern for people when Luka was coming to the team, because anybody that was watching the Lakers understood that LeBron has played very well off the ball. He allowed Austin Reeves to get comfortable with the ball running the offense. He allowed the ball and the offensive game plan to go through AD here and there. Now, of course, in the fourth quarter, he would take over and stuff like that. But now that he has Luka, he doesn't really need to do that. I don't think it just stops at needing a big man. I also think it comes down to Luka's defense. While the Lakers have played amazingly with Bron at the five, guarding the five, and all those things that have to go with a five's responsibility, it still can be something that haunts them in the long run when you're playing teams like Houston, like Denver, like OKC, all teams that have a wonderful front court, both offensively and defensively. Now, for me, I've been hanging my hat on the IQ of JJ, Luka, and Bron, knowing that scheming will be vital Which brings me to Luka and that defensive point being an X factor. He has to give effort on defense. The same kind of effort, if you go turn on that Mavs tape from when he just returned to Dallas, the effort we saw him give when he was matched up against AD. He's actually trying to front the post. He's actually trying to disrupt the entry pass to AD. He was actually understanding where the pass was coming from, being able to get a hand on the ball so that it's a deflection. Now we're running the other way. If you turn on that tape, that's the kind of defense the Lakers need to actually push through the playoffs and have a deep run. While Luka will get scored on, his defense isn't the best. Defense starts and ends with effort. If you're giving your fullest effort on defense, 9 times out of 10, things are going to go your way. And we saw that in that Mavs game. Again, I'm going to point to that game every single time because to me, it felt like he had a point to prove and he wanted to show that, you know, the things that the Mavs said about me, that the reason they traded me and all these other things, I'm fat, I'm lazy, don't play defense, etc., I want to show them. And he showed them in that game. And if he can continue to do that in the playoffs, it'll mean the world of a difference for the Lakers. This can see the Lakers going as far as Western Conference Finals and even further to the finals. But it does hinge upon that, making sure JJ's scheming is pristine to the nines, and they'll be good to go. That next team in the Western Conference, which has had a lot of turmoil to end the year, including firing their coach and GM, Mike Malone and Calvin Booth, is the Denver Nuggets. And their X factor to me is the others. And I don't necessarily mean Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon. I have faith in them. And of course, Jokic, that goes without saying. The guys I'm more so talking about is Russ, MPJ, Christian Braun, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett if he actually gets minutes, MPJ. These guys have to be almost perfect for this team to reach the heights that we saw them reach 2 years back. It's going to be hard because you're going through so much turmoil, new coaching and everything. But with that said, if you really want to win and you really want to do right by Jokic most specifically, these are the things that they're going to need to do. Russ needs to stop having the boneheaded plays. Like as a coach, anybody wants Russ on their team. He plays hard, he plays physical, and he plays 100% from minute 1 to minute 48. But with that said, you have to make sure it's contained. It's a contained type of spark that doesn't turn into a wildfire. Like I said, I trust AG, I trust Jamal Murray so long as he stays healthy, but it's the rest that I'm worried about. This is not the same reserves that we saw 2 years ago. They don't have a KCP. They don't have a Bruce Brown. But those guys are going to have to step in roles like that to see the Denver Nuggets be at the top of the mountain once again. Moving on to the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that has been streaking to end the year. They've won 9 of their last 10 games to close out the season. Can they really last in a deep playoff run? And that's my main question, because their X factor is health, injuries. Are you going to be able to withstand that deep playoff push? Are you going to be able to play basketball deep into June? Are you going to be able to do that? Because while I do understand that they have a good team, Zubac has had a career year. James Harden has been steady. Kawhi has come back and been a dog. Norman Powell, argument for most improved, but will y'all stay healthy? Because every single player I just named are players that they can get hurt. We've seen them get hurt, and it hinders the team. Now, of course, that's not their fault. Injuries happen. But with that said, it is a real thing to kind of bank on. Every year, I used to say this when PG and Kawhi were together. They play well all year long, but once it gets to March, April, that lactic acid in their muscles start to really set in, and they're so sore that when it came to playoff time, they just weren't themselves. And it's honest, they just really weren't themselves. I don't want to say that's how the Clippers still are, but we need to see that they're not that. I think the Clippers have a pretty good matchup in the first round. Zoobs is having a career year. I know I already said it. Harden has been his usual self. Older Harden, yes, but he can still get you a buck or two with 10 assists to match. And Kawhi has been on one, primed for playoff basketball after being hurt for majority of the year. Like I said, if they keep a clean bill of health, I genuinely feel the Clippers can be a dark horse to come out of the Western Conference. Moving on to the Golden State Warriors, which it's an interesting one to say the least, because this is a team where it could go either way. They can make a deep run, or they could just be out in the first round and it'll be crazy. But with that said, their X factor, in my humblest of opinions, is both Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler, and the kind of production that they're going to get from a night-to-night basis. Of course, both of them, I trust them on the defensive end of the ball to always be defensive guys that are shutting down possessions and finishing defensive possessions, but I need to see them be more aggressive on the offensive end. While Draymond is one of the best playmaking fours we've seen in our lifetime, I think he has to be more aggressive as a scorer to make it easier on Steph to find open looks. And the same goes with Jimmy. For some reason, once he got traded to Golden State, there's been a lot of games where he just comes out slow, he seems lethargic, and not really in tune to the game, to the point where they need him to actually get buckets and get busy. We saw it the other night. He actually was aggressive, watched him score 8 in a row by himself, going at the other team's weakest defender. If I'm not mistaken, it was Bojan Bogdanovic. That's the kind of Jimmy Butler they need. If they both come out aggressive, the way they can open up the floor, not only for Steph, but the rest of the team like Pods to get open shots, will greatly improve their odds to keep pushing and try to get Steph number 5. We're going to move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which this X factor is very interesting to me because I mentioned this to one of my friends on Twitter that is a Minnesota fan, and he pretty much agreed with me, but I do want to see what you guys think. For me, Minnesota, the biggest X factor is both Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels. Now, with regard to Julius, it's simple. Stay out of your own way. Don't do too much and let the game come to you. Julius Randle has a lot of moments where it seems like he's aggressive, but he's forcing it. You need to stay aggressive, but don't force it. Let it come to you. Don't take shots you don't need to take. Swing the ball around, get the ball moving, and get an open look. A lot of times, Julius Randle likes to take tough shots, and while he can be a tough shot maker, this is not viable in the playoffs. This is not something you want to see. You want to get easy looks, conserve as much energy as you can so you can keep pushing in those later rounds. Now with Jaden McDaniels, I need to see more consistency on the offensive end. You've played very well to close the year, very well on the offensive end, but as it relates to your shooting, there's games where we've seen you go 1 for 6, 1 for 5, 1 for 7. You can't have those games. You can't string those games together. Now, admittedly, he's done a lot better to where when he has a bad game like that, he can come back, shake back, and have a pretty good game where he's shooting 2 for 3, 3 for 4, so, 75% from 3, things like that. And that's amazing, but you got to be able to string those games together a lot more in succession, and that'll see your team being more successful going forward. And last but certainly not least, on the Western Conference, and the only team that I think really has a true X factor that can push them forward, the Memphis Grizzlies. And I'm not gonna lie, this is likely an underrated pool. It's funny that I saved this for the last one of the video, but it is what it is. I know a lot of people talk about different things being their X factor, like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, but I think that's low-hanging fruit, to be honest. I think their X factor is Santi Aldama. Those minutes that don't see Ja and Bane together, or Ja and Triple J, or Bane and Triple J, those are the minutes that we're gonna need Santi Aldama on the floor, continuing his same promising bench production that he had throughout the year. He's had a great year this season, being fifth best in points off the bench per 48 possessions. And that will be the key to Memphis surviving those minutes without those stars and being able to compete with other teams when Ja, Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. are sitting down. Now, of course, I don't think all three of them will be sitting at the same time at one time during this playoff run, but those times where one or two of them are sitting, Santi Aldama has to be able to be a wonderful offensive player and threat for them to push forward and beat some of those better teams in the Western Conference. That is all I got for the X factors for each playoff team in this year's NBA playoffs. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. Like I said before, I left timestamps in the description so that you could go to whatever team that you would like to go to if you don't feel like watching the video from start to finish, because this will likely be a 20-minute plus video, so it is one of those that's a little bit longer to sit through. But with that said, drop below some of your X factors from some of the teams that you're paying attention to in the playoffs, both Eastern and Western Conference, including your favorite team. Until next time, it is your boy TB with the greatest hoop stories and debates on the tube, and I'm gonna see you guys soon. I love you guys. I'm out. Peace.